the gentle haze of early morning, before the sun had yet pierced the horizon with its golden lance, the world held its breath in quiet reverence. Somewhere in that stillness, before even the crows stirred and the breeze remembered to blow, a boy was born to flame and duty. Rengoku Kyojuro. His name would one day echo like a mantra, like a legend whispered through camps and battlefields, through quiet sobs and hopeful eyes, passed from survivor to survivor, like a lantern in the dark. But before he became the Flame Hashira, before his name burned as brightly as the fire he wielded, he was simply Kyojuro, a child with bright eyes and a smile too big for the weight he would come to carry. He was born into the Rengoku family, a lineage steeped in the history of the Demon Slayer course. His father, Shinjuro, was the Flame Hashira of his time, a man once blazing with passion and precision. His mother, Ruka, soft-spoken and serene, carried a quiet strength in her every breath, her every movement. She was the steady earth to Shinjuro's fire, grounding him, anchoring their family in gentleness and warmth. It was from them that Kyojuro inherited the fire in his blood and the unwavering spirit that would become his compass. As a child, Kyojuro was surrounded by the flickering presence of fire, literal and metaphorical. His home was adorned with heirlooms and tomes, artifacts passed down through generations of flame bearers. Scrolls lined the walls, each one etched with the teachings and breathing techniques of Flame Hashira past. His early days were filled with curiosity and awe, his young fingers tracing the calligraphy of those ancient texts as he listened to his father speak of valor, of responsibility, of sacrifice. Kyojuro drank it all in like a thirsty ember, eager to ignite. But even within the heat of ambition, there was gentleness in him. He did not hunger for strength for its own sake. He wished to protect, to uplift. He delighted in the laughter of his younger brother, Senjuro, and often cradled his small hands in his own, promising silently to be his shield. There was no cruelty in Kyojuro, no harsh edge to his burning desire. His fire was a hearth, not a wildfire. It invited warmth rather than fear. He believed in goodness, in the value of life, in the simple power of choosing joy even when the world cracked beneath one's feet. But fire can consume even the most steady foundations. And it did. When his mother fell ill, the house dimmed. Ruka, once radiant with calm and compassion, grew frail. Her voice, though still soothing, carried the weight of her decline. And Kyojuro watched. Every day he sat by her side, holding her hand, studying the lines of her face as if memorizing them would allow him to carry her with him always. She smiled at him through the pain, whispering words that would brand themselves upon his heart. "You were born strong," she told him, "so that you could protect those who are not." And in that quiet moment, in the last chapter of her life, Kyojuro made a vow. one that would steer every step, every breath he took thereafter. He would live with honor, with compassion, with unshakable joy. No matter what he lost, her death left a silence that no voice could fill. Shinjiro, once a pillar of strength, collapsed under the weight of grief and expectation. He abandoned the sword, withdrew from his sons, and drowned his sorrow in bitterness and alcohol. The flame that had once guided Kyojuro flickered uncertainly in the absence of his father's pride. And yet, Kyojuro did not falter. While others might have crumbled, he stood. He trained with discipline bordering on reverence, studying the flame-breathing forms with a fervor that bordered on the sacred. He practiced until his muscles screamed and his hands bled. And then he practiced more, not out of anger, not out of vengeance, but because he had a promise to keep. A mother's dying wish, a child's solemn oath. Senjuro watched with wide eyes as his brother carried the mantle their father had abandoned. And Kyojuro never once faltered in his smile. He was determined not to let their father's shadow eclipse their path. "Keep your heart burning," he would say, again and again, to himself, to Senjuro, to the empty halls of their once proud household. It became more than a mantra. It became who he was. When the time came, Kyojuro joined the Demon Slayer course. He passed the final selection with resolute determination, his blade dancing through the night like a ribbon of flame. His spirit, undaunted by the horrors that others carried from that mountain, remained radiant. And the Corps took notice. He rose swiftly through the ranks, not because he sought glory, but because he trained harder than anyone. Because he believed with every fiber of his being in the sacred duty of the Hashira, to protect the weak, to stand against the tide of darkness with unwavering light. As he became the Flame Hashira, his name spread like sparks on dry wind. Rengoku Kyojuro, the warrior with the golden hair and lion's heart, the man whose laughter was as loud as his battle cry. He was known for his kindness, for the way he would remember even the smallest names, the quietest voices. He was not simply a fighter. He was a light in the ever-encroaching night. And even those who had long stopped believing in heroes found themselves moved by his unrelenting optimism. And still, Kyojuro carried his burdens quietly. He never asked the world to forgive his father. He never demanded anyone understand the hole his mother's absence had left. He simply continued. He continued to burn, brightly and joyfully, so that others might not have to stumble through the dark alone. He kept his promises to his mother, to his brother, to himself. But the path ahead would test him in ways no training ever could. For in the shadows, beyond the reach of his flame, a growing threat stirred, one that would force Kyojuro to confront not only the demons of the world, but the ever-present possibility that even the strongest fires could be extinguished by fate's cruel hand And still, he would smile. Still, he would burn. There was a calmness in Kyojuro's soul that felt almost contradictory to the path he had chosen. While other demon slayers bore their pain with stoic silence or burning rage, Kyojuro carried his burden with unwavering warmth. He had come to accept the transience of life, the way flames flicker and fade, the way everything beautiful is destined to vanish. But rather than succumb to despair, he found purpose in that impermanence. It was not the duration of the flame that mattered to him, but how brightly it burned while it lived. This belief, quiet and profound, shaped every choice he made and every life he touched. As a Hashira, Kyojuro's responsibilities were endless. His days were consumed by missions, trainings, meetings, and battles that pushed even the most seasoned warriors to their limits. Yet, he approached each duty with the same enthusiasm and respect as he had shown on his first day as a core member. Even as his name climbed through the ranks of admiration, even as others whispered about the strength of the new Flame Hashira, he remained humble. He never viewed himself as greater than others, only as someone with the strength to bear more on behalf of those who could not. He made a point to speak with his fellow demon slayers, not just to issue orders or deliver battle strategies, but to know them. He remembered their names, listened to their worries, encouraged their efforts. Kyojuro believed that no soldier should ever feel forgotten, that no one who risked their life in the face of demons should ever feel invisible. In his presence, others felt seen, valued, protected. And then there was Senjuro. Though the distance between them had widened with time, Kyojuro traveling endlessly, Senjuro left behind in their quiet home. The bond they shared had only deepened. In the letters he sent, Kyojuro wrote with honesty and encouragement, never allowing his little brother to doubt his own worth. He never pressured Senjuro to follow in his footsteps. Instead, he reminded him that there was strength in gentleness, that not all bravery came with a sword in hand. And Senjuro, for all his quiet nature and gentle spirit, cherished every word. To him, Kyojuro wasn't just a brother. He was proof that goodness could still thrive in a world constantly stained by blood. The other Hashira respected Kyojuro, though some didn't always understand him. His unwavering optimism was, to some, naive. His relentless smile, too cheerful for the core's grim realities. But those who took the time to know him, to train beside him, or fight alongside him, soon realized that his brightness wasn't a mask. It was a choice, a declaration. Even in the face of overwhelming darkness, Kyojuro chose to shine. His breathing techniques were masterful, each form of flame breathing executed with precision and elegance, like watching fire dance in the wind. His body moved with explosive grace, the force of his strikes leaving trails of heat behind him. But even more remarkable than his combat skill was his spirit. He never fought for vengeance or anger. Every swing of his blade, every risk he took, was rooted in love for humanity, for justice, for the lives he could protect by placing himself in danger. One of his missions took him to a mountain village plagued by a particularly cruel demon, one who preyed on children. Kyojuro arrived just after dusk, his cape billowing like a flag of warmth in the cold night. The villagers watched him with both awe and fear, for they had seen many slayers come and fail. But Kyojuro greeted them with a bow, listened to their stories with patience, and promised, not with empty words, but with quiet certainty, that the terror would end. That night, as the wind howled through the pines and shadows crawled like beasts, Kyojuro faced the demon alone. It was fast, slippery, cruel, taunting him with twisted laughter, hiding among the trees, mimicking the voices of the children it had taken. But Kyojuro did not waver. His flame did not flicker. He stood tall, blade steady, heart calm. And when the moment came, when the demon lunged in a blur of claws and teeth, he met it with a single, searing strike. His blade glowed like sunrise, cleaving through the monster, with such force that even the silence that followed seemed to crackle. He did not speak of the battle afterward. He simply returned to the village, accepted their thanks with a gentle nod, and walked back down the mountain before dawn. But those who saw him never forgot the way his eyes had shone in the darkness, or the way the night seemed less frightening once he had passed through it. Still, for all the missions, all the demons he defeated, all the lives he touched, there remained an unspoken ache within him, his father. Shinjiro had once been everything Kyojuro aspired to be, a man of honor and strength, a Flame Hashira with unmatched discipline. But the fire in him had gone out long ago, extinguished by despair and grief. The man who now occupied the Rengoku household was not the same as the one in Kyojuro's childhood memories. And yet, Kyojuro did not hate him. He visited him still, though he was often met with silence or scorn. He bore the sharp words, the cold stares, with the same patience he offered the world. For Kyojuro, love was not conditional. It was a choice made again and again, even when it was not returned. One night, Shinjiro told him that his efforts were meaningless, that becoming a Hashira was pointless, that their family's legacy was nothing but suffering. And Kyojuro, standing beneath the eaves of their old house, eyes lit with the calm of 1,000 sunsets, simply smiled. "I will continue to live with honor," he said, "and I will protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is all that matters to me." He did not seek validation. He did not require his father's blessing to feel whole, because he had already chosen who he would be. And so, the days turned. The cores began whispering of strange demon movements, of new threats rising from the shadows. Kyojuro listened, vigilant, his senses ever sharp, but his smile never faded. He trained harder. He taught the younger slayers with even greater care. He prepared, not for glory or battle, but for the moment he might be needed most. That moment was coming. It would arrive with the clatter of train wheels, with the scent of steel and smoke. A mission that would test not just his strength, but the very foundation of his beliefs. But for now, Kyojuro stood beneath the wide sky, flames flickering at his side, his breath steady and strong, his heart wide open to the world. He was ready to face whatever would come next. Because that is what flame does. It burns, it protects, and it endures as the days folded into years and the sun rose and set with unwavering rhythm. Kyojuro's presence within the Demon Slayer Corps became a flame that others looked toward for warmth, for guidance, and for strength. Though young in years, he exuded the poise and discipline of someone who had lived through 100 lifetimes of resolve. Each mission he undertook bore not only the responsibility of slaying demons, but the quiet burden of carrying on a legacy he refused to let die, even if the one who created it had long since stepped away from the path. His father, once the Flame Hashira, had retreated into a silent world of bitterness and wine, watching Kyojuro with empty eyes, never once offering a word of pride or guidance. But the young swordsman did not falter in the face of that absence. He found in himself a source of light, a reservoir of discipline and love for justice that needed no validation to burn brightly. Kyojuro read the Flame Hashira text over and over, its brittle pages nearly memorized, not just in words, but in spirit. He trained with relentless passion, refining each kata of the flame-breathing forms until they moved with the certainty and elegance of fire dancing on a candle's wick. He did not seek glory or recognition. He sought to be useful, to be kind, to embody what the Demon Slayer Corps stood for. And so, when his own trial came in the form of a demon that had decimated an entire village, Kyojuro met the moment not with fear, but with the steady courage that had grown inside him like a bonfire patiently tended over time. The battle had not been easy. The demon had the strength of a dozen men and moved with unnatural agility. But Kyojuro's movements were pure instinct, forged by years of repetition and quiet longing. When the final slash came, the demon's body turned to ash in the wake of his flame, and the townspeople looked at him not with fear, but with wonder. A man of the Corps had saved them, a warrior of light. In the wake of that mission, Kyojuro received news from headquarters. He was to be considered for the rank of Hashira. There was no ceremony, no celebration, just a summons and a recognition of the weight he was ready to carry. His heart swelled not with pride, but with gratitude. Gratitude that his life had not been wasted, that he could honor the name of Rengoku not through anger or resentment, but by being a pillar others could lean on. When he returned home, he found his younger brother, Senjuro, waiting by the door. His father did not rise. He didn't speak. But Senjuro looked at his brother with wide eyes, filled with admiration, and that was enough. Kyojuro placed his hand on his brother's shoulder and knelt before him. "You must live each day honestly," he told him, his voice quiet but firm. "With a full heart. That is all anyone can ask of you." It was not a command, not a lesson, but a promise that no matter what happened, he would always strive to be someone Senjuro could believe in. And for a moment, just a moment, he thought he saw something shift in his father's eyes. Not pride, not joy, but a flicker of recognition, a dim ember buried beneath years of ash. As Hashira, Kyojuro began taking on more dangerous missions, often alone, and sometimes with younger demon slayers seeking to learn from his example. He did not speak much on the battlefield, but his presence reassured. His voice, when it came, was calm, almost reverent. He would praise others when they fought bravely. He would shield them when they faltered. And always, always, he moved forward. His philosophy was simple. Life is fleeting, but the way one lives, that can echo beyond death in one quiet mission through a wooded region plagued by disappearances. Kyojuro uncovered a demon that had been preying on wanderers in the night. The demon was cruel, toying with its victims, stretching out their suffering. But even as it laughed and raged, Kyojuro's expression did not change. He moved with elegance and purpose, every swing of his blade like the stroke of a brush painting flames into the darkness. When the final blow came, he did not gloat or berate. He whispered a silent prayer, not for the demon, but for those it had taken, hoping their spirits would find peace. That was his way, not to revel in violence, but to cleanse the world, one flicker of light at a time. Word of the flame, Hashira, began to spread. To the villagers and the core alike, he was a beacon, steadfast, warm, and unyielding. Yet he never lost his humility. He ate with the same appetite, laughed with the same warmth, and trained with the same dedication as before. Sometimes, in the rare quiet moments between missions, he would sit beneath a tree and simply breathe, watching the leaves sway above. In those moments, he felt close to his mother, as though her spirit rested beside him. Her words still rang clear, that it was noble to protect the weak, that strength must serve others, that a flame must never burn for itself alone. And when young slayers came to him, frightened, uncertain, barely able to hold their swords, he would offer no judgment, only encouragement. "If your heart is strong, your sword will follow," he would say. He did not promise survival. He promised meaning. The days continued like this. Missions, training, guidance, flame. Kyojuro moved through the world, with a quiet kind of joy, unburdened by fear of death, because he had already chosen how to live. Every step, every breath was part of a larger vow, a vow to his family, to the core, to the world that still had children to protect, and morning light worth preserving. And somewhere, deep in the forests of Japan, demons stirred. Stronger ones, crueler ones, the kind that would test even the strongest pillars. But Kyojuro did not flinch at the thought. He merely kept moving forward, flame ever burning, toward the next dawn. The world of the demon slayer was not one of triumph alone. It was a world of sorrow, threaded with resilience, of grief intertwined with moments of profound beauty. And Kyojuro, in all his radiance, understood this deeply. Though his expression was often marked by optimism, though his words lifted others with unwavering certainty, within his heart lived the quiet knowledge that he stood on borrowed time, not out of fear, but in reverence for the path he had chosen. Every mission, every swing of his blade was made with the understanding that it might be his last. And because of that, he fought with unmatched sincerity, pouring every ounce of his soul into every breath and every form. One morning, as the mist curled lazily around the earth and sunlight crept through the trees like golden threads, Kyojuro returned to headquarters after a particularly grueling mission. A demon had taken root in a mountain village, one that preyed on those who sought the forest for firewood. Entire families had vanished without a trace. Kyojuro had spent 3 days moving silently through the brush, learning the demon's habits, understanding its rhythm. When he struck, it was swift, a precise dance of flame and wind, his sword carving through the shadows with the purity of purpose only he could bring. He left behind no scars on the land, only peace. The village, once drenched in fear, welcomed the morning for the first time in weeks. He said little of his victory to the other Hashira, not out of modesty, but because he did not see it as a victory. He saw it as his duty. And yet, among the other pillars, there was a growing respect for Kyojuro, not just for his skill, but for the way he made others feel. Even in silence, he seemed to elevate the space around him. Shinobu, the insect Hashira, once commented with a quiet smile that talking to Rengoku felt like standing in the sun after a cold rain. Tengen, the sound Hashira, clapped him on the back often, calling him a flamboyant firework. Even Giyu, who so often kept to himself, nodded in quiet approval whenever Kyojuro passed. Still, the warmest light he carried was reserved for the youngest among the cores, the frightened ones, barely old enough to understand the magnitude of their decision to join. Kyojuro would sit with them during training breaks, sharing onigiri or recounting tales, not of battles or slaying demons, but of simpler things, his favorite trees to nap under, the way the wind smelled before it rained, the best way to make miso soup the way his mother used to. These moments were as important to him as any mission. They reminded him of why he fought, of who he fought for. On one occasion, he received a letter from Senjuro, a small, neat scroll folded with care. In it, his brother wrote of how school was going, how he was reading more books, how he was trying to become someone Kyojuro would be proud of. And at the end, a single line. "Father still doesn't say much, but I think he listens when I talk about you." Kyojuro stared at the parchment for a long time, the smile on his face gentle and touched by something wistful. He wrote back that very night, reminding Senjuro that he already was someone to be proud of, and that their father's silence did not mean absence. Some embers, he believed, only needed time and patience to burn again. As autumn came and the leaves began their quiet transformation into gold and rust, Kyojuro was called to a joint meeting of the Hashira. Reports had begun to surface of strange activity. Demons acting in groups, coordinated attacks, even whispers of the 12 Kizuki moving in patterns that suggested greater intent. Muzan Kibutsuji, the progenitor of all demons, remained elusive, but his hand could be felt moving across the land like an invisible fog. The core was on edge. There was no panic, but a quiet tightening of resolve. Each Hashira knew the storm was coming. And yet, in the heart of that tension, Kyojuro remained calm. Later that evening, while the others had dispersed, he stood outside the main hall, gazing up at the stars. He thought of his mother again, of the night she passed, how she had gazed at him with such softness, even as her breath slowed. She had told him then that his strength was not just in his sword, but in his heart. That true power lay in kindness, in living with integrity, even when no one was watching. He carried those words with him always. In that quiet moment beneath the stars, he offered a small, silent promise that no matter what came next, he would not betray the path she had guided him toward. Not long after, a mission arrived from headquarters. There had been reports of a demon aboard a train, the Mugen train, where people were vanishing mysteriously during travel. A Hashira was needed, and Kyojuro stepped forward without hesitation. It was not that he wished for danger, but he believed it was his duty to face the darkness so others would not have to. When the details were laid before him, he read them with care. He packed his belongings, his movements methodical. Before leaving, he visited his brother one last time. He cooked dinner. They sat together, sharing a meal like old times, and Kyojuro spoke of the value of compassion, of carrying light into dark places. He didn't say goodbye, only smiled, his golden eyes warm, and promised he'd return. He stepped onto the platform the next day with the rising sun at his back, his haori fluttering in the breeze like a banner of fire. Passengers bustled about, unaware of the storm that lurked within the engine's shadow. Kyojuro felt it, though, a stirring in the wind, a stillness too deep to be ordinary. But he showed no fear. He boarded the train, his posture proud, his gaze steady. Somewhere on this ride, something awaited him, and whatever it was, he would face it the only way he knew how, with courage, with compassion, and with the full flame of his soul. The train rattled softly as it carved its path through misty valleys and starlit tunnels, its iron frame gently swaying with a rhythm older than memory. For many aboard, it was simply a ride like any other, a means to get from one town to the next, a moment to doze, to sip tea, to press one's forehead against the cool glass and wonder about tomorrow. But for Rengoku Kyojuro, the moment he set foot aboard the Mugen train, he knew the atmosphere was not right. Not just quiet, but still in a way that unsettled the wind. There was an echo beneath every sound, a silence behind every voice. Something was waiting, watching. He sat in a passenger seat with perfect posture, his sword resting against the window frame, his haori draped like sunlight over his broad shoulders. His expression was serene, and yet his eyes never stopped observing. Every footstep in the aisle, every flicker of movement outside. He was prepared for anything, and yet not burdened by tension. He embodied what it meant to be a Hashira, rooted in readiness, guided by discipline, but always tethered to a deeper calm. It wasn't long before 3 others joined him: Tanjiro Kamado, Zenitsu Agatsuma, and Inosuke Hashibira, young demon slayers with different energies, different scars. Kyojuro greeted them with the same warmth he offered everyone, a voice like thunder, softened by the hearth, a smile as radiant as the sun after rain. "Delicious," he declared without hesitation, as he devoured his bento boxes, one after another, filling the cabin with his booming approval and laughter. For a time, the fear in the air seemed to evaporate, pushed back by the force of his light. But demons are not easily deterred. Beneath the train, lurking in the shadows of steel and smoke, Enmu waited. A lower moon demon, gifted with Muzan's blood, Enmu had been entrusted with a mission: kill the Hashira, and he would rise in rank. With powers rooted in dreams, he crept into the subconscious of the sleeping passengers, weaving illusion and memory into shackles. And soon, all aboard, including the slayers, were cast into deep slumber. In his dream, Kyojuro stood in a world of golden fields stretching into forever. The sky was endless blue, the air warm and kind. He saw his childhood home in the distance, and when he stepped forward, his feet didn't stir the grass. He was part of it, one with this peace. And then, from the doorway of that home, came a voice, soft, motherly, unmistakable. His mother, as she had always been, strong, graceful, wise. She welcomed him with open arms, but even in the beauty of the illusion, Kyojuro understood. This was not real. As tempting as it was to linger, to bask in the warmth of a world where no one hurt, where no one died, his soul would not allow him to accept comfort built upon the manipulation of the mind. Without hesitation, he broke free. In that mental realm, he turned inward, seeking the core of his spirit. And when he found it, a brilliant fire, unmoving at the center of his soul, he plunged his sword into the illusion and awoke. The train shuddered. The demon's influence cracked. Kyojuro leapt into action without hesitation, barking instructions, shielding passengers, and facing down the strange new reality that awaited them. The demon had fused with the train itself. Its flesh spread across the compartments like living tar, its consciousness slithering through every bolt and beam. The battle was unlike anything before. No single body to strike, no eyes to meet. It was chaos, and within that chaos, Kyojuro moved with perfect clarity. He and the young demon slayers fought side by side, cleaving through the demon's manifestations, slicing away tendrils and bone. He protected those who could not defend themselves, prioritizing lives above all else. When Tanjiro was injured, Kyojuro shielded him without question. When Zenitsu and Inosuke faltered, he lent them strength through his presence alone. He fought not with arrogance, but with absolute resolve. And then, silence. Enmu was defeated. The train derailed, crashing in a blaze of splinters and steel. Bodies strewn, smoke rising, the ground torn like paper beneath the wreckage. But Kyojuro stood tall, bruised, bloodied, but unwavering. He did not have long to catch his breath. From the forest stepped a figure cloaked in menace, upper rank 3 of the 12. Kazuki, a Kaza, a being of terrifying strength, driven by twisted ideology. His body pulsed with power, his skin etched with demonic tattoos, his eyes glowing with predatory hunger. And as he approached, he spoke not of chaos or destruction, but of admiration. He saw Kyojuro's strength. He saw the fire burning in the Hashira's soul, and he offered him immortality. Become a demon, Akaza urged. Transcend death. Preserve your strength for eternity. Together, they could grow stronger forever. Never age, never fade. It was not mockery. It was genuine. In Akaza's twisted way, it was praise. But to Kyojuro, it was an affront to everything he held sacred. He refused, not with anger, but with absolute clarity. I will fulfill my duty. I will not allow anyone here to die. With those words, the battle began. The air between them shimmered with heat, as if the flame inside Rengoku's soul radiated outward into the world itself. The clash of swords and fists rang out across the broken landscape, echoing through the trees and the twisted wreckage of the derailed train. Kyojuro stood as a wall between death and the lives he swore to protect. His every movement precise, disciplined, beautiful. His footwork danced across the crumbled stone and earth like a ritual, a language of intent passed from master to student through years of repetition and resolve. Akaza moved like a nightmare made flesh, fluid, devastating, fast beyond comprehension. His fists cracked the air, each strike carrying enough force to reduce bone to powder. His regeneration was nearly instantaneous, and he spoke as he fought, his voice a haunting mix of wonder and disappointment. Why do you not retreat? Why do you not become like me? You will die. Why do you choose death? But Rengoku did not answer him with words. He answered with fire. Each swing of his blade burned brighter, the techniques of the flame-breathing style exploding into radiant arcs. First form, unknowing fire. Second form, rising, scorching sun. His blade danced with brilliance, a beacon against the growing dark. And yet, even as the battle pushed his body to its very limits, there was no hate in Kyojuro's eyes. Only peace. Only purpose. He did not fight for vengeance. He did not fight to prove anything. He fought because it was right. Because he had promised. Akaza's strength was monstrous, but he could not shake Kyojuro. The flame. Hashira's resolve was unmovable. Every shattered rib, every splintered muscle, every breath more shallow than the last. It didn't matter. Kyojuro pressed forward. He remembered his mother's words, not as a haunting voice, but as a guide. Those who are strong must protect those who are not. It echoed through his spirit, through every flame that leapt from his sword. And still, Akaza urged him, begged him, "You could be so much more." But Kyojuro knew the truth that demons never understood. It is not strength that defines a person, but how they use it. Immortality meant nothing if it required surrendering one's soul. To abandon his humanity, to become a demon, would be to betray the very reason he lived. Even as Akaza's blows fractured his body, even as his vision blurred and his legs threatened to collapse beneath him, Kyojuro stood like a pillar of dawn, rooted in love, loyalty, and the quiet courage of doing what must be done. The final clash was one of legend. Flame against shadow. Hope against despair. Kyojuro unleashed ninth form. Rengoku, a technique that summoned every ounce of his life into one final, blinding strike. The heat scorched the ground, split the air, and lit the darkness as if the sun itself had touched the earth. His sword pierced through Akaza's neck. But it was not enough. Even wounded, even injured beyond recognition, Akaza tore himself free before his head could be severed. The sun was rising, and he knew he had to escape. The light would be his death. And so he fled, screaming into the forest with his severed limbs slowly stitching themselves back together. Cowardice disguised as survival. Kyojuro stood still, his sword buried in the dirt, his body no longer listening to the commands of his soul. Blood pooled beneath him, warm and thick. But he remained upright, his back straight, his expression peaceful. Tanjiro, Inosuke, and the others arrived too late. They saw him there, burning with the last embers of life, and rushed to his side. Tanjiro cried out, voice hoarse with grief, demanding why Akaza had run, why the demon had lived when someone so good was dying. But Kyojuro's smile never faded. He turned his gaze to them, his eyes full of pride and gentleness. There was no fear in him, only love. He spoke slowly, carefully, each word a gift. To Tanjiro, he entrusted a legacy, not of power, but of belief. He praised the boy's strength, not of the sword, but of heart. He told him to protect Nezuko, to walk the path of the sun, to believe in his own spirit. "Set your heart ablaze," he whispered. And then he looked upward. In those final moments, he saw her again, his mother. Not in a hallucination, but in the space beyond sight, beyond pain. She stood there in the distance, watching him. And when he asked if he had done well, if he had fulfilled the role she once asked of him, she answered without words. Her eyes said everything. "Yes, you did so very well." The sun broke over the horizon, painting the world in hues of gold and orange. And in that light, Rengoku Kyojuro closed his eyes and passed from this world, standing upright like a warrior, like a guardian, like the Flame Hashira he was born to be. No funeral pyre was needed. His life had been the fire, and even in death, his warmth remained. When the morning sun rose fully and bathed the trees in a soft amber glow, silence lingered longer than usual. The breeze was still, as if the world itself hesitated, reluctant to continue turning without the presence of the man who had just departed it. Rengoku Kyojuro had stood tall against death, and now he stood no longer. But his presence remained, carved not into the ground, but into the hearts of those left behind. Where his body had fallen, there was now only a sword, blood-stained, still warm, and the faint scent of fire that refused to fade. Tanjiro sat near the place where Kyojuro had drawn his last breath. The boy's face was streaked with tears that refused to dry. Inosuke stood with his back turned, fists clenched, his wild mask hiding the tremble in his shoulders. Zenitsu was quiet, unusually so. His eyes lowered. Words caught in his throat. They were young still, and though they had faced demons, they had never faced a loss that felt this absolute. Rengoku had not been their family, but he had made himself their protector, their guiding flame. And now, that light was gone. Yet even in mourning, something had changed in them. Kyojuro had not died in fear. He had not begged or cursed. He had smiled, even as his body collapsed from wounds too deep to survive. That smile lingered in Tanjiro's memory, like an ember that would not go out. It warmed the grief, softened it slightly, and gave it a purpose. Because in his final breath, Rengoku had not left them with Chana. He had left them with a mission. Tanjiro remembered the words, "Set your heart ablaze," not as a command, but as an invitation. a way of living. To face the world, not with hesitation, but with courage. To protect the weak, not because it is easy, but because it is right. To find strength not only in the body, but in the heart. In Rengoku's death, Tanjiro found something strange. Not despair, but clarity. The aftermath of the battle was quiet. Corpses had to be gathered, the wounded tended to, the wreckage of the train surveyed. The passengers who had survived owed their lives to a man whose name they would never fully know. Some wept quietly when they learned a Hashira had died to protect them. Others bowed their heads, holding their children close, thanking a flame they did not see. A few left flowers behind, simple ones, picked from nearby. And then they were gone. The world moved on, as it always does. But something was different now. Word of the flame. Hashira's death spread quickly. The Hashira themselves, each powerful and proud in their own right, received the news in their own ways. Giyu Tomioka, the quiet water Hashira, stared long and hard at the message. His face betrayed nothing, but his hands tightened around the scroll until the paper crinkled beneath his grip. He had never said it aloud, but he respected Rengoku, his openness, his warmth, the unshakable way he stood up for what he believed in. Giyu had always been distant, but even he could not ignore the silence left behind. Shinobu Kocho, the insect Hashira, received the news with a soft exhale. She stood in her garden, eyes scanning the horizon, fingers gently brushing a blooming wisteria. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Rengoku had been too kind for this world, she thought. And yet, she knew that kindness was not weakness. It was strength, rarer than steel. Tengen Uzui scoffed at first, brushing off the words as if they couldn't be real. But later, when no one was watching, he sat in silence and remembered the flame Hashira's loud laughter, his brilliant smile, the way his eyes never wavered. Even a man like Tengen, obsessed with flash and flare, knew the quiet nobility that Rengoku had carried. Muichiro Tokito forgot, then remembered, then forgot again. His memory, broken and cloudy as it was, struggled to hold on to anything. But somewhere deep inside him, a flicker remained, a faint warmth, like a candle against a storm. Even Sanemi, whose rage was a weapon sharper than any blade, stood alone beneath the sky and muttered a quiet curse, not at Rengoku, but at the world. He hated the unfairness of it, but he respected it too. Rengoku had died exactly as he lived, without regret. The Demon Slayer course buried Rengoku with all the honors a Hashira deserved. His body, wrapped in white, was placed beneath a tall tree that looked toward the horizon he had once protected. His sword was laid beside him, its hilt still warm, the flame crest engraved into the steel, a final reminder of who he was. His name would be remembered not just in stone or ceremony, but in the lives he saved. in the way he made others want to be better. His father did not come to the funeral. Shinjuro Rengoku stayed home, drowning in his cups, eyes red not from grief, but from shame. When the messenger had told him the news, he had thrown the cup against the wall, then collapsed to his knees, hands gripping his head. He had called his son a fool, called the Hashira cowards, screamed that strength meant nothing if it ended in death. But deep down, he knew the truth. Kyojuro had lived a life he himself could not, a life that honored their family, their name, their mother. Later, he would visit the grave, not with flowers, not with tears, but with silence. He would stand there, whisper nothing, and leave. But something inside him would change, slow and quiet, like spring thawing into summer. Senjuro, the younger brother, stood before the grave for a long time. He held a piece of parchment in his hands, Kyojuro's last letter. In it, his brother had told him to keep studying, to stay kind, to be strong, not like a warrior, but like a good person. Senjuro clutched it to his chest and whispered a promise that he would try, that he would carry the name with pride, that he would remember. Back on the mountain, Tanjiro stood alone one evening, watching the sky burn with the colors of sunset. He thought of the Flame Hashira and how the sky always looked brighter when he was around. He closed his eyes and inhaled the warmth. It was as if Rengoku was still there, just beyond sight, walking ahead, clearing the path. Rengoku Kyojuro did not vanish. He lived on in the choices of others. In every life saved, every demon slain, every heart set ablaze with the will to protect, he remained. And as the stars emerged, gentle and steady, Tanjiro whispered into the wind, "Thank you." And somewhere, far away, or maybe deep within, a voice answered not in words, but in warmth.